Hello friends, welcome to this week's card class. This week I wanted to make 3 cards that were kind of springy, kind of fun, a little floral, and also we're making a shadow box card. So we're going to start with that one, the shadow box card, because first off, it is probably my favorite of these 3, but also it's going to be the more complicated of the 3 cards. So I figured we'll just do this one first and just get it done and enjoy that one before we move on to the 2 slightly easier cards. Okay, so these are our bits and pieces this time around. I'm just gonna move that to the side. Okay, so what we're gonna be doing here is, I've already scored your card base here. So we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna fold this here, and then this little end here, we're gonna fold that in. Okay, so there's a small tab on the far side here, and this little tab is what we're gonna be adhering this to. But before we do that, we need to adhere some stuff on the inside. So when we open this up, this is the large tab on this side with our circle here. On the right side of that, okay, so the opposite from the little tab here, we're gonna be putting double-sided tape at the top and on the bottom down there. Okay. So I have my double-sided tape here and here. Then we're gonna take our brown mesh ribbon. We're gonna fold that in half this way and fold it in half again, and then we're gonna trim. When we trim this right down the middle, you mix it so you end up with 2 pieces that are mesh, but they're a little bit more narrow. Okay, so we got 2 of those. So one of these, we're just gonna stick right here on the right side of that circle. And then we're gonna take our scissors and trim that off so it's flush with the edge of the card. Oh, I'm just gonna pull that a little bit tighter there. There we go. And we'll trim that there. All right. Also, on the opposite of the circle, this area right here, this is where we're going to be gluing down our wood grain paper. Now, it's important that the wood grain paper does not hang off the edge and into the tab area. I'm noticing that mine wasn't cut perfectly straight, so I'm going to need to trim that off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put double-sided tape on the inside here. Just so you know, I'm going to push this up towards the top of this, okay, up towards the top. So there's going to be a little bit of blue at the bottom here showing, and that's totally fine. And you can decide which side of the wood grain paper you love the most. I think everyone ended up with a slightly different wood grain, which is fine. But just so you know, you'll want to choose the one that you decide that you love the most. So we're just gonna tuck this in here. I'm going right up against the left edge of where that score mark is. And then on the right here, because I know this is gonna hang off the edge, I'm just gonna pull back this little tab, which is gonna expose whatever part of that wood grain paper is longer than, or that is hanging off the edge into the tab area. So I'm gonna fold this back and I'm gonna take my scissors and just trim this along the edge. Yours might have fit perfectly, but I'm worried that mine is going to prevent the little tab from folding in. So I'm gonna trim off that excess wood grain paper there. Okay, I'm gonna fold that back towards the wood grain. Now we're gonna go ahead and adhere this together. So I'm gonna flip this over. I'm gonna put double-sided tape only on this little tab right here. Okay, you can also use glue if you are preferring glue, that's totally fine. I'm just gonna put double-sided tape there. And then we're gonna take this large tab and we're gonna match it up with a small tab. So I'm just gonna match that up right along that edge. Now, as I'm doing this, eyeball that a little bit better. As I'm doing this here, I need to make sure that my card is going to sit totally flat. So as I'm going to press this on here, I'm going to press, oh my gosh, come on, little tab. There we go. Okay, press that on there. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that my card lays completely flat. And if I need to emphasize any folds, now would be a great time to do that, because we want to make sure that our card is going to fit into an A2 envelope. And sometimes I'll turn it the other direction as well, just to make sure that it's going to land totally flat. Okay? All right, so now that we have that, now this little piece, and it's been scored on the left and right with 1/4 inch. So you have these little tabs right here. One's gonna fold down and one's gonna fold up. All right, I'm just gonna show you that from a distance. Okay, there we are. One's this way and one's this way. Okay, so we're gonna put some double-sided tape on the front and some double-sided tape on the back side of these little tabs. So one's gonna go, double-sided tape is gonna go on the front of that one, and it's gonna go on the back side of the other tab. So the double-sided tape is not going to be on the same side. Okay, one here and one is back here. Okay. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Tape there and tape there. Okay. All right, now before we adhere this in place here, what we're going to do is we're going to put double-sided tape on the front of this. And I'm going to say I would recommend maybe going from here to here with your double-sided tape. And I'm going to do actually 3 rows of double-sided tape. If you happen to have 3/4 inch wide double-sided tape, a strip that fits that size would be great. So you can see, I don't know if you can see this here. I don't have any tape here or here. It's just in the middle right here. Okay. Once you have that down, it's time to make our nest. So we have our little nesty pieces here. And then you have a little bag of some little die cut pieces. And in the little bag, you're going to see these little robin eggs. So we're going to go ahead and pull those out now. How these were done was I took brown watercolor and I splattered my ink onto the blue background, and then I used an egg die cut to cut out the little egg shapes. Isn't that cute? So I'm going to take a moment here and I'm just going to stick some of my little eggs down like they're in a little nest. And I'm probably just going to, I'll just do like 4 of those kind of in the middle-ish of the card there. All right, so I have my double-sided tape here. I'm going to put a little bit more just at the bottom of my eggs. So this whole area here is that's all sticky right here. Okay. All right, now I'm going to take my nesting bits. And I want to stick them on here, so you could just cram them on, or you could flip this upside down and kind of pick them up like this. They're not going to be perfect, and that is actually the point, is that we want the nest to be kind of discombobulated and a little messy, because birds aren't really too particular when they're making their nests. I'm just going to kind of crunch those down a little bit. If you're needing your card to be a little bit more flat, you could bring them all flat as possible and then rip the edges so that the eggs are exposed. I like this card has a little bit of dimension, so I'm going to leave it like that. Okay. Oh, and I see some of my paper stuck to my tape I did on the side here. All right, so now that I have all of my nesting pieces down, I'm going to move my nesting pieces out of the way. Just so you know how these were created, I took 3 shades of brown paper and put them in my shredder, and then that's how those were created. I just thought that was a fun idea and a great way to make little nesting pieces. Okay, so now we have our piece here. I have double-sided tape on this side, and I need to put a little bit more here. Okay, so now we're going to fold this one up and this one down, the little tabs. We're going to take our shadow box, flip it upside down so we're looking down on it. Then we're going to take this little strip right here and we're going to tuck it right into the middle of that card. Okay, and again, I highly recommend use double-sided tape instead of glue for this, because we're just going to kind of lay that there right on the inside. I'm not pressing it in place, and the reason why is because we're going to take this and we're going to fold our card flat. Whoops! Probably should have at least tacked it down a tiny bit. There we go. I'm just going to press that in there just gently. But as I'm going to flatten my card here and press there, what's going to happen is that it's going to naturally move where that little tab wants to go. So then when I go this direction, it's going to emphasize how it's stuck in place. And so it may have moved or adjusted, but that's where it wants to sit. So we're going to leave it like that. But again, we want to make sure that our card can fold totally flat. That's the most important part. Okay. Now we have our sentiment that says "You are loved." So I'm going to put double-sided tape. I'm only going to put double-sided tape on the bottom half of my little circle here, right where it says the sentiment "You are loved," but just on the back side of that part. And then I'm going to just tuck this right in here, and you have to kind of decide how far up you want your little sentiment to be. So I put it in here and I would just tap it in place just to see, oh yeah, I can read my sentiment, or you might look at it and say, oh, I really can't read my sentiment, in which case you may want to adjust it to where it's going to make the most sense for you. I'm happy with where my sentiment is, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to fold my card totally flat and flip it over so that I can take my scissors here and just trim this down to size. And that's going to make sure that my little tab, whoops, you see my card is not perfectly aligned, but that is okay. But we want to make sure it's flush with the top of the card. That's the important part there. There we go. Okay, so once that is flush with the top of the card, then we are going to go on, and I'm going to add a couple more little eggs in here. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue at the base of my little eggs. And then I'm just going to tuck those in here. I'm going to go right behind the other grouping of eggs that I have, and I'm just going to stick that to the back side of those eggs. Okay, and I love these little speckled eggs. They're so cute. Look just like robin eggs. Okay, so now This is actually a wheat die cut, but I cut it out of green because I wanted to make it look a little bit more fresh and a little bit more springy. So that's why I decided to go with this color. If you're wondering how I got this tone on tone, this is actually just green sour apple cardstock. And then I took Lucky Clover Distress Oxide ink with my blending brush and just brushed a little bit on the top to get this really nice variegation of color here. That's why it's a little bit dark green, a little bit light green. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my little ferns here. We're going to put these at the very bottom, so I'm just going to lay on my mesh all the way across the bottom of the card here, and I'm going to take glue and I'm going to put glue on the back side of the little fern or the little wheat bits. And I'm going to lay this down here. So what's going to need to happen is that the glue will need to go through the mesh to adhere to the cardstock, so that this piece of cardstock with the little wheat is attaching to the base of the cardstock through the mesh. And hopefully that will lock the mesh in place. Now, if it's not gluing for you, like it's not gluing for me, just flip this over and use this as a guide for where you can put the glue that will be hidden behind the little wheat. And then we're going to stick that on here. And that should hold in place. Then on the left-hand side, we're going to do the same thing with this other little sprig. Again, just a little bit of glue at the bottom of the little wheat sprig there. I'm going to lay this down because I kind of want it to kind of frame out our little nest here. Again, you can try and press and hold this in place. It may or may not want to, depending on how much glue you have, it may or may not want to stick. Flip that over and just add a little bit of glue to where you can see the wheat through the mesh. And we're just going to stick that down and let that dry. And then finally, we're going to do this last little guy with the little sprig hanging off. And here I'm going to do more of my little sprigs with glue. And then also this little line here, especially this edge, this little sprigs here. The rest of the sprig is going to be hanging in front of the little nest. So you probably don't need to put a bunch of glue on that because it has nowhere to stick. So I'm just going to stick this up here so it's a little bit taller than the rest. And once that's in place, I'm going to take my scissors and just trim any excess mesh that's hanging off of the edge. Make sure your little wheat bits are held in place there, and then anything hanging off the bottom we'll go ahead and trim as well. Stick that down and we'll trim this off here. And there we have card number 1, the You Are Loved card with the little tiny little eggs. Oh, it's so cute. And then of course it folds totally flat to fit into your envelope. And then if you're asking yourself, but where will you write the sentiment? What a great question. On the back side here, this is where you're going to write your sentiment. Now you may notice that right now my card is not wanting to sit totally flat, and that's because I have some of the nesting material is sticking off the bottom. So to get rid of that, again, you fold your card totally flat, and then you're just going to trim off any excess little nesting material that might be sticking off the edge. Okay, and then that way your card will sit flat, no problem. There we are. All right, perfect. On to the next card.